Welcome to Oxano's monthly webinar. Our topic this month is turbocharged discipleship, and our guest here with us today is Jim Randall. He is the Oxano co-founder, CEO, and senior lead navigator. My name is Mike Gamble. I'm also a senior lead navigator. I'll be hosting our conversation today around installing high-performance disciple-making engine guaranteed to accelerate your leadership, drive transformation, and energize your entire church. So let's jump in. Jim Randall, why don't you share with us just in a quick sentence, what is the challenge? What's the opportunity we're going to talk about today?
Good morning. Actually, good afternoon now. I suppose there are some places. It's good afternoon for me from Florida, but I guess it is still good morning to you, Mike, out there in Montana. So we're kind of rolling the bubble, aren't we, across the United States? Yeah, Mike, good to see you today, and thank you for the opportunity to be able to share a little bit about what God's been doing in the world of discipleship and some of the things that we're learning and some of the things that we're seeing happening in the churches that we serve. It's absolutely no question that the challenge really that's out there. Multipliers.org commissioned a survey just recently that less than 5% of churches in the United States are disciple-making churches. Now, you let that sit in for a little bit, and it's a little bit of a wow, right, Mike?
It's more. It's more than a wow. I'm going to have to challenge that. It feels like 5%
Sure.
really
Sure.
low. How are they
Sure.
defining disciple-making church? Just give
Yeah.
us more
Yeah,
information.
and to be fair, it's really that no churches in the study really reflect a viral-like disciple-making movement. And so when you really kind of come in there and you push down on it and see, are disciples making disciples? And that's what they're finding is not happening. Are some disciples being made? Absolutely, there's disciples being made.
So the
But
leaders may be making disciples, but disciples
sure.
aren't making disciples.
Right. And they found in this study that churches, they didn't have common basic terms for definition of discipleship. They couldn't define disciple. They couldn't even define disciple making. So you can only imagine, Mike, that if one of the problems right out of the gate is the inability to define the key word, you're not going to see this overwhelmingly successful number when pastors and ministry leaders are stuck at one of the most core things that seems intuitive. It seems like the most natural thing for us, but obviously an issue, and obviously an issue that we find in churches all across the country. As a matter of fact, we find that nearly 2 in 3 pastors are reaching out and saying, hey, disciple making is an area that they need to invest more time in to develop, to help to be better pastors. And so literally 2 in 3 are sitting there, or 63% are sitting there going, hey, we struggle with this and we need help. And so obviously that self-awareness is a huge step to being able to move forward. And I know many of the ministry leaders that are on the webinar with us today are probably killing it, and they represent the percentage that are making disciples. They represent some of the leaders who are reaching out, and so we're thankful for those ministry leaders. But we really want to spend a little bit of time today and share with all of you something that we believe God is going to empower you to turbocharge your discipleship. I am a relatively recent, one of my pastors in Indianapolis is a huge F1 fan, and he introduced me to the whole F1 culture about 2 years ago, and I've kind of become a bit of a follower. I can't say I'm an expert, and if anyone challenges me on the various drivers and teams and things like that, I probably break down pretty quickly and acquiesce to their knowledge over mine for sure. But we do know this when it comes to F1 cars. They're some of the fastest cars that are out there. Their turbocharged engines are unbelievable. And matter of fact, to give you a bit of a metric and understanding there, a typical family sedan that most of us probably drive or have runs on about 75 to about 100 horsepower. whereas an F1 engine runs on about 850 to 900 horsepower, and in some cases even more. But yet the engine is not that incredibly different. There are a lot of similarities between those two engines. It's just there are certain components that are in an F1 engine that have been turbocharged and make it to be absolutely, incredibly fast, incredibly efficient. And so you have drivers like Verstappen, who's ranked number 1 in the world and probably everyone's favorite. And I do like him a lot. I kind of find myself buying into the competitive nature between him and Hamilton, and find myself in my shadow side every once in a while, hoping that Hamilton's going to come and knock him off the top. And some of you who are F1 fans know what I'm talking about. Mike, do they even have F1 cars in Montana?
Well, there was a time here where we didn't have a speed limit. This is a long time ago.
Dude.
They would come through and they would drive on our interstate.
Right.
And I had my little Honda Accord, and I would floor. It didn't work. But
I love it.
I don't think you can drive them on the road.
Right. I love it. Well, I would say this, that today we're going to talk about what a ministry leader has to do to become to have a disciple making culture, to have a disciple making engine within their church. And it's really the same analogy between just a normal family sedan and an F1 car is that you really have to ask the question, what are you doing to prioritize disciple making in your culture, in your church? And you could have a stock culture. It's a culture that loves Jesus. It may be a church culture that loves God. And that's amazing, right? That's great. But that doesn't mean that it has a disciple making engine and that you're actually producing disciples as a product or as a byproduct of the engine that you're driving. And so what we want to do today, or what I'd like to do, is just introduce some principles for ministry leaders to consider as you're thinking about your culture, as you're thinking about your identity of who you are. And in order to do that, I really want to kind of give us a kind of a baseline conversation. If you've been a part of the Exano tribe for any time, you're familiar with what we would call the vision frame. And the vision frame is that core construct that we use, or that core framework that we use, that helps ministry leaders and churches have their own distinctive identity and know their direction, know who they are, and know where God is taking them, right? And as a part of that, we really do say, listen, every ministry leader should operate from a standard, basic understanding or ability to answer these 5 questions. And Mike, I'm guessing as a senior lead navigator with Exano, you're eyeball deep in this all day, every day, with the churches that you get to serve, the clients, the pastors, the ministry leaders. And so this is not new to you as well either, right?
Absolutely. We've been preaching this gospel for 10 years, 15 years, right? I think I first sat on the other side of the table as an executive pastor working on this in 2008. And this isn't new just to the church world. These are just basic questions to lead any organization.
Right.
We textualized it just for the church and for the Great Commission.
Yeah, that's right. And Mike, I love the way you even just kind of called it the gospel, right? The gospel of clarity first. And certainly we're not eclipsing the gospel and the reconciliation of man to Jesus. But we do really want to say that there are fundamental aspects that when churches are struggling, that they're usually struggling because they do not have clarity around these 5 components. And so we talk about these as the ability for that leader to answer these 5 irreducible questions of leadership, which are, what are we doing as it relates to mission? Like, what's what is it that we're trying to accomplish? What is it that God has called us to? Values, second component. Why are we doing it? I often use the phrase, it's the why behind the what, right?
Mm.
Why are we doing it? What's the passion? What is it that gets us excited? Strategy is the how are we doing it? It's the how we accomplish the mission at that broadest level. And what we've learned in the last several years is how is not about people just showing up and involvement. How is about engagement. How are we engaging people into the body life of our church? How are we making disciples, right? And then the fourth one, outcomes. When are we successful? If you've been a part of the Exano tribe for a while, you'll see us kind of a little bit of a language shift there as we move from measures language to outcomes. And we do that because we talk in terms of what is it that end result? What is it that we would like to see happen in every person who is a Christ follower that's a part of your congregation? And so it's when are we being successful? And I love to remind everybody, if you accidentally misspell win with W-I-N instead of W-H-E-N, you're still correct. You've still spelled it right. What's the win? What is it that we're trying to accomplish? When are we successful? And then the last irreducible question answers that direction question. It answers that question of where is God taking us? What is this? What's this living language that anticipates and illustrates God's better future for our church? So if you've been around for a while, those 5 questions, those 5 components of the vision frame shouldn't be new to you. If it is new to you, wow, what a challenge even in this webinar today for you to really wrestle, to work through being able to answer those questions and to help your leadership, help your staff and your team come to that point of kind of collaborative decision making to where everyone is on the same page when it relates to answering those questions. Because remember, we say clarity isn't everything, but clarity will change everything. And at the end of the day, we believe the vision frame kind of provides that for us. So kind of a centered set for us. I guess you could say maybe Mike in a way is the vision frame. It's something that we all everything that we do at Exano really kind of pings off of that clarity that we believe a church and an organization should have within the vision frame. But this webinar is not just about that vision frame, or at least it's not just about that part of the vision frame. This webinar is about how to turbocharge your culture into a disciple-making culture from just something that would be seen as a basic, purchasing the car at the local dealership, to taking it from a car that has that type of effectiveness and power to one that has a different level to where we really are disciples who are making disciples. And so what I'd like to do, and Mike, love to get even some of your input on this as we talk. I'd like to introduce to you just some principles that maybe you as a ministry leader can follow along, that you can begin to think, you can begin to evaluate. We're going to give you a couple of tools, a couple of handouts as a part of this webinar as well. But introduce a couple of principles that we believe are essential in having a disciple-making engine as a part of your church's identity and direction, not just a standard generic one, right? And so you see the same 2 first columns of the vision frame component and the irreducible question of leadership. But now I'm introducing a 3rd column here that is about this disciple-making engine. And it kind of the way I want you to think about this, and the way we challenge leaders to think about this, is when we take a look at the clarity of your organization, when we look underneath the hood of your church, do we see these 5 principles in play? It's a big factor there. Can we see them in play when it relates to your identity and direction? Do we see these 5 principles as a part of your vision frame and a part of your vision plan. And the case I'll make today is this: if we don't see many of these, or maybe prayerfully even all of these principles in your vision frame and your vision plan, then more than likely you're not making disciples, or at least you're not making disciples who are making disciples, right?
And just to be clear, Jim, you're not saying that a church can function without any sense of these answers, but you're saying a unique sense of our clarity of a vision frame that really fits together, fits who we are, as
That's
opposed
right.
to generic answers borrowed from the church down the street that may or may not have anything to do with us in any way.
Absolutely. Less than 12 hours ago, I'm on a phone call with two pastors in Raleigh, North Carolina area. Church is 10 years old. Here was the confession on the phone. We photocopied the identity and direction of our church. What you're looking at that God has allowed to work through, and in some ways, in spite of our initial efforts, is something that just is absolute photocopied. It's there. It has meaning, but it doesn't have depth. And literally the conversation is, how do we go to another level? How do we have clarity as both an organization that does have an end result that is about multiplying disciples? Because right now we're not doing it. And the comment was, we're not even sure if we make disciples, much less multiply disciples. But yet there's some clarity there, right?
It seems like there was a day when you could borrow the clarity from a church down the street and you could build a church.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, for sure.
But as ministry changes, as ministry landscape adapts, it's getting harder and harder to borrow and be successful at disciple making. We can still kind of plug and play a church growth engine, like borrow the right kind of music and the right kind of building. But even with that, if it's not genuine, it's hard to reproduce disciples because that's just an event. And that can be a strategy, but that's where we have to move from being just building churches for church's sake, as opposed to guiding churches to advance the kingdom, which is what Jesus called us to do.
I absolutely, Mike. I've heard you use the phrase ecclesiocentric before, and it's that idea where we're just so kind of church centric that we're not really, and that's not a bad thing. It's not innately a bad thing, but are we so church centric that we're inward focused? We're so church centric that we're all about what we're building as an Ephesus versus mobilizing people, versus that aspect of, and we do believe words create worlds. And if that's the case, what words are you using to create that world in the future that you want to see happen? Right. So these 5 principles, let me fly through them real quick, and then we'll just talk about some practical tools for application for ministry leaders on here, and just ways for you to have great conversation. I pray and hope it's thought-provoking conversation with your team. So in taking a look at disciple making engine, we really kind of talk about these 5 kind of principles, or just, you might even kind of look at these as characteristics for each part of the vision frame. The first one is your mission a disciple? Does it have a disciple sending purpose to it? Is there a disciple sending purpose to your mission? Mm-hmm. In other words, when you talk about your mission, is it a lot of churches have a good mission? Many will have, like you said, that photocopied mission or something. It may be about loving God. It may be about loving others. It may be each other, maybe about loving the world, whatever. And those are good things. They're not necessarily wrong things that's something we should be pursuing. But is it so generic to where you're not being super clear that we are about having a disciple sending purpose as a part of our mission? So when you take and look at your mission, is that what it says, what it doesn't say? We'll look at this a little bit more in depth on the next in just a few moments. Mm-hmm. The second one is our values do they embody or do they encompass a disciple shaping culture? So do we communicate values in such a way that the result over time, that our values has shaped us into a disciple making culture? The next one is it a disciple moving pathway? Does our strategy provide a disciple moving pathway? In other words, are people moving on a pathway? Are they on a journey to becoming disciples who make disciples? Next one is, when it comes to our outcomes, do they push toward a disciple and help clarify disciple defining measures? Meaning, are we able to look into someone's life, or are they, excuse me, say that different. Are they able to look into their own life and know and understand that they are becoming more like Jesus? And then the last one is the vision plan that we have, is the vision that we created for our church. Does it possess a disciple inspiring dream? Right? Is it painting the picture of a better tomorrow that is helping people to not just become more like Christ, which is huge, right? But to be replicating and multiplying that faith forward. And so, Mike, what I would make as a statement is that a church that lacks emphasis and importance in these 5 principles, and there is no evidence of a disciple sending purpose, a disciple shaping culture, a disciple moving pathway, a disciple defining measures, disciple inspiring dream, is more than likely, not always the case, but more than likely a church that is struggling with making disciples.
You can't work on what you can't talk about. So,
right.
Having the language isn't everything. It doesn't solve every problem, but how in the world can I develop a thing if I don't even have the words to be able to say to my kids, like, I need X, Y, and Z.
That's right. Shared language, right? That's what we do as families. That's what we do as leaders, or is what's the shared language that we've created that allow us to talk about it, allow us to strive. So what we want to do, and a couple of the tools that we want to provide for you around these 5 components of the vision frame and these 5 principles of a disciple making engine, is we're going to provide you with a couple tools to kind of look through. So first, I'll just kind of talk to you just a bit about is this idea of disciple making clarity. In other words, what clarity might we need to bring to our vision frame to better tune our vision frame to what? To this disciple making engine. I'm not going to be able to drive 250 miles an hour in the Toyota Camry that I pick up at the dealer down the road. It's not going to happen. The car wasn't designed for it. The engine wasn't designed for it. It's not going to be able to handle it. You're going to blow your engine when you get much faster than 120 miles an hour, 140, maybe 150 miles an hour. You're going to blow your engine because the engine is not designed for it. And we sit here as pastors and ministry leaders and wonder why we're not making disciples. It's because our church isn't designed to make disciples. We don't have the right engine running our car. So we seriously have to ask ourselves the question, might we have to take another look at our engine? And so for some of you on the Zoom today and some of the ministry leaders, you're going to be challenged in your own leadership as to whether you're providing that clarity. So created a worksheet for you. It'll be in one of the handouts, by the way, that will be available as a follow-up to this. It'll come in the email follow-up. Creating a handout that just lets you kind of do an evaluation there around each of the 5 components, right? So the first one is this idea of a disciple sending purpose, right? And so what might our mission statement, we take a look at our mission statement and we look inside of our mission statement, and our mission statement is, and by the way, we talk about a mission statement as being the Great Commission communicated in a culturally relevant way, right? Great Commission communicated in a culturally relevant way. Well, is your mission taking the Great Commission and communicating it in that culturally relevant way, in such a way that it emphasizes the disciple sending purpose that God gave to us in Matthew and in Acts and all throughout the Gospels as it relates to the Great Commission? Or have we neutralized it? Mike, have you ever come across some of those churches that have who've taken their, that have a mission statement that's neutral, or that it's generic, or that it's broad?
Mhm.
I don't know about you, but I have, and it's kind of where I'll start, a few minutes ago, like, their missions, once again, I think there's a right intent there, but we're about loving God, right? We're about, we're about loving others. We're about loving the world. And yeah, maybe there's a bit of an outward focus in there, but quite frankly, it's so generic and so broad that love is the predominant theme, and that's great. We just hug on each other. And the culture that we've created is a kumbaya culture. It's a fellowship culture, and we wonder why we're not making disciples.
Mhm.
Well,
And another side to that can be that the church is so focused on internal development of we have to be the perfect Christians, and it's so internal that we're not ready to go out because we have to be perfected first.
Absolutely. We kind of got to have everything together. We got to have our whole act together. We've got to, absolutely. The second one, disciple shaping culture, you heard me allude to it a few minutes ago. There's a lot of churches that have some stellar values, right? And once again, we believe in values. We push that. We've been the clarion caller for for the clarity, especially around values and how it creates culture and shapes ethos for the church. But if your church has a value that goes something like this, we value the Bible. We value biblical truth. And by the way, I've been a part of helping churches craft that. I am not saying that that's a negative thing, but I'm just saying, if that's all your church is saying about the importance of disciple making, which is that value of the Word of God, and you're not valuing something like, as a church, multiplying disciples, or if you're not valuing disciples who make disciples, then no wonder that you don't have a culture of disciple making. If you're not valuing the idea of what it means to grow beyond yourself, you're not valuing what it means to, like I said, to multiply in some way or another, then you really are back to that kind of, how'd you say it, Mike, that inward growth or that inward perfection. Yeah. If we're trying to perfect the inward side of our church to where we're not looking outside the walls, well, then no wonder. If we're not looking at our neighbors, we're not looking at people, that lost people matter. If we're not valuing those types of things, well, no wonder that we're not making disciples.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a priority to us, right?
Yeah, it's that old world kind of creating a holy space within our sanctuary.
Yeah.
We can't let anything that might not live up to that holiness standard, we can't let it in, because it will. And by doing that, we exclude the very people God has called us to reach.
You nailed it. And what I want to challenge you to do as leaders, you're going to have a handout that goes with this. Write your language in here. So our vision frame language that we have as a church, write your mission in there beside that disciple sending purpose, and evaluate. Is it green? Man, we're killing it. And not only is it a great disciple sending purpose, it's wrapped up in having a disciple sending purpose, but man, it's helping to accelerate it. Well, you're going to put a green there, or you're going to put maybe a yellow going up. And the whole idea of the green, yellow, red is that you're just evaluating your effectiveness as it relates to that principle with the vision frame side of it, right? And if you look at that disciple sending purpose or that disciple shaping culture, and you see all of your values listed there, and they're not pointing you toward anything in the area of making disciples, it's probably going to be a red. It's the bottom line. Maybe maybe it's implied. Okay, maybe you're going to have a yellow. But if you're not directly in some ways being able to communicate it, if you can, then obviously that's going to be a green. So you get to kind of, as a team, talk through it. It's subjective, but just kind of talk through it and kind of come to those conclusions.
Now,
The
Jim,
third one, go ahead, Mike.
Jim, as you kind of walk through how to use this exercise, it kind of sounds like you're encouraging churches that may have gone through a process, whether they read Church Unique and applied the principles, or they even brought you or me in to walk them through and help them articulate these answers. So here's my question for you. Is it possible that a team could have gone through an Axano process 10 years ago and have their answers and have them not be green?
Yep. For two ways. Number one, because in some ways or another, they didn't articulate the importance of it. They felt that they were a disciple making church by default, or they felt like that was something that was a given. And so because it was something a given, they didn't have to articulate it within their primary language. So that's the first one. And so that aspect is yes. The second is that as a leader, they have not undergirded or built up or provide the foundation to their clarity language that they developed 10 years ago to make sure everyone receives it as a disciple making clarity frame. And so I believe that as a leader, you can help what you have developed be clearly communicated as a disciple making importance or as a disciple making priority, even if the words aren't exactly used. Does that make sense, Mike? I think there's that. I think it's missing in some, but I also just think that in some, they're just not providing the emphasis and the tie to the disciple making priority.
Right. There is a whole skill to leading with clarity.
Yep, it is.
Even if you have the clarity, but then
That's right.
executing and being able to hold your church accountable to leaning into that disciple sending purpose, and like really seeing our mission statement is our disciple sending purpose, and our values are our disciple shaping culture. If we don't lead with that, then the clarity in a paper, it's not worth the paper it's printed on.
Absolutely right, Mike. Nailed it. That's actually absolutely correct. The third one is disciple moving pathway. So what is your, we always talk about strategy as your strategy of engagement, how people are assimilated into your church. This is where JoJo goes when they're new at your church, right? How they're getting involved, right? So it answers question how. And the question becomes, is your strategy clearly helping someone become a disciple? Is your strategy helping to move them through intentional vehicles and intentional environments that are going to help them to be a disciple, become a disciple, and help them to make other disciples?
Yeah.
Right?
I think that the challenge with strategy is that, or the disciple moving pathway, which we call strategy, is that so often it becomes our way of talking about how to grow the church. Which is not, which is good. Like, let's grow the church, but we forget to make sure that it's making disciples, and that becomes the secondary consideration rather than the primary consideration.
Agreed.
We start to lose the importance of what disciple moving pathway is supposed to accomplish.
Yeah, agreed. The fourth one, and these are just fun little indicators to the right that we just kind of dropped in there to kind of point you to how it may play out. But it's interesting that the one that says disciple defining measures has a red, and it has a red now that I'm looking at it. It's indicative of the number of churches that have absolutely no outcomes that have been defined. They have no disciple defining measures to help someone to have, even as a benchmark, as a outcomes that are the floor, not the ceiling, as it relates to someone's spiritual growth. That have almost nothing. The only thing they're measuring as a church is maybe how often you're attending and how well you're giving, right? And so that idea that we've got to establish a baseline, at least a baseline as a congregation, of what it means to live like Jesus. What does it mean when we talk about, as a church, that our mission is to help people experience Christ in every way, or our mission is to help people become fully devoted followers, or our mission is about helping someone to thrive in their walk with Christ. Whatever that is, whatever that we call it, the B state of your mission is, does it have the ability to unpack and to provide characteristics of spiritual growth that are discipleship in nature, right? That are about what it means to be a disciple. And then the last one is, do you have, as a church, do you have that disciple inspiring dream? Now, we work a lot with helping churches develop a vision plan. We call it the 1414 as a scaffolding. If I take a snapshot, if I take a look at your vision plan, do I see embedded inside your vision plan a vision that 5 years, 7 years, 10 years down the road, however far out it's going, maybe 3 years, that you have, we want to see disciples being made at an unprecedented level in our church? Do I see that you are actually you see something out there, you're marking it, and you're saying, that's where we're headed? We want to see that reality of disciple making to transform our church, more importantly, to transform our community for Christ. And so do I see it embedded with that? Or do I just see some kind of good things and I see a good vision there? I may not even see any plan whatsoever. I may see a list of strategic initiatives that are more about the color of the carpet, changing the carpet and painting the walls and adding a building, than I see about the disciples, the intentionality for making disciples. So this tool is intended to push you, and it's intended to make you think about, do you have the language in the first place? Because some of you are going to hit on a couple of these rows and I don't even think we know what a disciple moving pathway is. And we certainly don't have any disciple defining measures. And we haven't articulated a disciple inspiring dream since the last time we built our new fellowship hall. That's the last thing we even communicated as a dream. Then obviously you got a void. You got a vacuum in this, both for clarity and for disciple making clarity, right? But for some of you that have this language, my prayer is that you're going to have healthy conversations about what do you need to do to undergird it in verbal conversation, or possibly even change some of it to increase that likelihood of that when we look under the hood of your engine of your church, that we see an engine that's about making disciples. Does that make sense, Mike?
Absolutely. There's a couple questions on the chat feed here that I think.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So one of them is Eric is asking for just a quick example of healthy defining measures. What do they look like?
Yeah. That's great. That's great. I'm thinking real quick of one of our churches. It's the Arbor Church up in Spring Arbor, Michigan. And Eric, thanks for being on the call, on the webinar with us today. Eric, they've gone through and defined 8 characteristics of what it looks like to be rooted in your relationship with Christ. And if I had a few minutes to pull them up, I could pull them up real quick and just kind of talk you through these 8 characteristics of what it means to be rooted. And as a part of that rooting, it is that understanding of your identity and understanding of who you are in Christ. But it's also one of those is about how you're sharing that with someone else. So it's about an evangelism side, and it's how you're helping other people to grow. So I love the way that the Arbor Church has kind of gone through and characterized those. We're going to look at a few more here. We'll look at least one more here in a minute. But the church I was with last night, yesterday afternoon down in West Palm Beach, identified 7 characteristics of what it meant to be to live a life that's devoted to Christ and to Christ's teachings and to Christ's ways. And so they go through and they talk about these 7 characteristics of what it means to live a life fully devoted to Christ. That's a great question, Eric.
Great, thank you, Jim. One more before we go to the next slide.
Yeah,
Kaylee
sure.
asks, what is a generic disciple moving pathway, and how is it different from an assimilation process, a volunteer pipeline? Just give us a minute on what that disciple moving pathway can look like in a church.
Let me do the first one, and then Mike, I may have you restate the second part of the question. So a generic disciple making pathway really might be one that is it's probably going to come across as purely attractional, and it's probably going to come across primarily about the person's involvement, engagement only at your church, and it's not necessarily pushing them outside the walls of your church. So I think that what we experience in the North American church and what we experience in the churches that we serve is it's very easy for us to get to we call it that worship, connect, serve, assimilation process, which is there's enormous value and there's enormous truth in that, right? And there is validity in that. We gather for worship on a Sunday. We connect in some form of group environment, whether that's a small group, community group. It might even be a more formal Sunday school, but it's some type of smaller gathering or smaller group than the larger worship experience gathering. And then there's that challenge to serve in some way, many times serving inside the church, serving in a ministry area or something like that. And listen, once again, I'm all for that. We're just making the comment that if you're trying to turbocharge, then you've got to come in and say that that's not going to be quite enough, that there's got to be some personalization of growth here that activates that faith into a more one-on-one way, right? That person is going to they're going to be a mentor, they're going to be a discipler, they're going to be a multiplier, right? And so I would, worship, connect, serve, multiply. Let's not just stop with the 3. Let's add a component there of an assimilation in our assimilation process that really will result in multiplying disciples, versus assuming that if we worship, connect, and serve, that someone on the backside of that is going to in all likelihood or have a possibility to multiply, when in reality they're probably not going to. Mike, did I get the second part of that question?
Does it include replace assimilation pathways, volunteer pipelines?
I don't think it includes replacing. If I'm going to zero in the word replacing, and this was from who was this from, Mike?
This is from Kaylee.
Kaylee, I don't think it replaces that at all. As a matter of fact, I would use this phrase. These are principles that are going to beef up. Once again, let me go back to the analogy. Once again, I'm not a car person. If my dad heard me talking right now, he would be laughing, because he would say I'm the one son out of all of them that's more likely to use a mechanic the rest of their life. But the size of an engine between that stock car at the dealer versus one that is an F1, there's not a lot of difference in the size. What's difference is what you put into it, the components. I would come back to my leadership pipeline. I would come back to my assimilation process, and I would say, am I making sure that some of these 5 principles, or if not all these 5 principles, or some of these principles, are embedded in the way we're thinking about leadership? So is our leadership pipeline internally focused, or is it externally focused? Is our leadership pipeline pushing us to multiplying disciples, or is it just a leadership pipeline for the sake of moving up, right? And so I wouldn't use the word replace, but I would say incorporated within is maybe a better way to say it.
Right. So I think we need to pivot to the next slide.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So the next slide is really just another tool for you as a team to just kind of poke the bear, push the envelope, right? Have the conversation. Are there some shifts that we need to make in our culture and who we are? And these are shifts that are going to move us from addition practices to multiplication realities. Once again, if we're not making disciples who make disciples, it's probably because we're bogged down in addition practices, meaning we're prioritizing programs and attendance to programs. We're prioritizing studies, individual studies that are about growth, but growth with no end, meaning growth, we always ask the question, growth to what end? Growth that we're getting bigger and fatter, our growth in such a way that we are using it in a way to help someone else in their spiritual growth and their spiritual walk. And so what are some of those addition practices? And we, I love doing the idea of shifts because it really gets out on the table a team desiring for their church and their ministry to be different and to be able to articulate that. So we would say something like a shift from an internal focus to an external focus. And Mike, you feel free to jump into some of these as well. But like a shift, a shift from absorbing to applying.
Right.
One
thing that I think about is there's that old adage of the church gathers and scatters, and
yes,
focus on growing during gathering, and then we just kind of assume that people are going to come back, and instead of asking the question, how can we grow the kingdom while our people are scattered? And that's where the multiplication is. Absolutely.
It's a great example. And really what I love about this little exercise, may only take 10, 15 minutes to do it, but what I love about it is it really brings to light 2 things, some think holes and some practices that we have become entrapped in. And that's the first fill in the blank. But then it lets us dream, and it lets us be able to focus on where we want to head, where we want to go. What do we want to see? It's different, right? And so if it's always about gathering, and we're kind of frustrated, it's always about gathering. Well, scattering is what we want to start achieve. So we start having conversations about scattering more than we have conversations about gathering, which is a huge thing for ministry leaders, because we get caught up in talking about gathering all day long, and we rarely talk about scattering.
Right. From the chat, Anne contributed shift from come here to go there. And it actually captures the sentiment there just in 2 words. It's build the church versus build the kingdom. Now, of course, we build the church so we can build the kingdom, but so often we don't do the second half of that sentence. And that's that's the challenge.
Yeah, that's good. So these 2 tools, I hope these 2 tools will help you to evaluate what's under the hood, right? And that type of thing. So yeah, hopefully this one helps as well.
So as we move to a summary here this morning, we think of mission as that disciple sending purpose. Values is our disciple shaping culture. Strategy is our disciple moving pathway. Our outcomes are our disciple defining measures, and our vision is our disciple inspiring dream. So with that summary, Jim, do you have an example for us this morning from a church that we've worked with that we could put up on the screen and people could take a look at?
Yeah. We one of our senior lead navigators, David Putman. Some of you know David. David was recently working with Summer Street Church up in Nantucket. And Derek Worthington is the pastor there. I don't personally know Derek. We haven't got to meet yet. And so hopefully one day I'll be able to meet him. But David shared with me this the other day. And when he shared it with me, I thought to myself, man, what a great example of a church. And I wish I could show you the before and after, because you're going to see the after more than you would see the before. You wouldn't see the before, but the before really was a church that was, and we'll just kind of say it like this, a church that was that had a great desire and a great love, but they weren't intentional with their language. And so after going through the process and really kind of applying these principles of a disciple making engine, you see a church that results in a church that's desiring and wanting, and it's about helping people in Nantucket find a home and family devoted to following Jesus. And there's no greater thought of what it means to have a disciple sending purpose than to say, hey, we're gonna follow Jesus. We're gonna follow the ways of Jesus. We have a desire to look like Jesus, or to walk like Jesus, sorry. And we have a desire to follow the ways of Jesus and do as Jesus did. So I love the way that they incorporated that kind of disciple sending purpose there. And you see their values there: welcome and compassion and devotion, all very strong values of what it means to say, hey, we want to have an environment that is about making disciples. And some of you will think of some other values that are much more explicit, welcome, compassion, devotion, multiply, or whatever, right? A lot of different ways you can communicate that. Measures or outcomes that are all about what it means to see ourselves, to grow in our walk with Christ in such a way. You'll even see the way being a devoted follower of Jesus is all about relationship. And therefore, we have value in the following ways of what we see. We see, if you're walking like Jesus, we see God as our Father, right? We see others as our sisters and brothers. We see to ourselves as a daughter or son, and then to the world as a neighbor and someone that we're reaching out to. And a strategy there, we don't have time to go into all this aspect because there's a lot of ways that this gets unpacked, right? But it talks a lot about the communion table and coming together and gathering and expressing and sharing what God has done in your life, and quiet table. Just that aspect of just personal growth and what it means to follow Christ, right? A cafe table where you really are really helping other people to experience that what it means to follow Christ, and then that common table where you really are gathering together for that purpose of that shared love for Christ. What I really love about this example, and this is what really blew me away, I think a lot of it was the way they communicated their vision moving forward. A growing family of disciples who gather with their friends and neighbors regularly at this common table for good news about Jesus, right? And sharing that with other people in that area for generations to come. You'll even see that one of their strategies is developing a relational discipleship pathway. And then they took their entire first year plan and said it's all about a culture of discipleship, with a focus to launch a discipleship pathway, equipping leaders to spend daily time in quiet time around the table, weekly time at the cafe table in groups, right? And then having 12 disciple makers discipling 36 disciples. It doesn't get much more intentional to say that we have a disciple making engine than to come back and to communicate a vision plan with this. And then you see everything that they have at the bottom is about making that culture of discipleship happen. So I love what this theme has done. This is fairly new, something new in the culture of Summer Street Church. And so good example. Once again, it's not about whether your church hits it on all 5 of them. It's how do you articulate it? How do you Does it hit it on some of them? As a leader, do you reinforce it? And so I want to encourage you to use those tools. After the webinar today, you'll see about 3 tools that we push to you. That these are handouts that just kind of reinforce what I've covered with you today. And yeah, thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to unpack a little bit of these principles of the disciple making engine.
Thank you, Jim. It's exciting to hear this and see this develop, and even in our own practice with Auxano, even sharpening up our own understanding of how the vision frame works, how we execute that, and that the just coming to become aware that we can, if we're not careful, build a vision frame that is ecclesiocentric, that builds the church, that isn't connected to the Great Commission or the kingdom of God. And at that point, you wonder, like, is this even a church? And so it's great to be explicit about that, to be able to grade ourselves, to make tweaks as we need to. And as we move to the close, we want to highlight to everybody that our team has a new book by Clint Grider. He's one of our senior lead navigators. And Jim, why don't you just give us a quick primer on Mind the Gap so that everybody knows to be on the lookout for it?
Yeah, let me just even say it like this, because I know our time, we're pretty almost out of time here, but let me just say it like this. When it comes to 2 of the 5 components, more specifically, the area of strategy and outcomes, the entire book was written on the premise that you can't just articulate well, unfortunately, most churches don't even do that well. But it's not enough just to have a possible strategy or maybe have some outcomes. You really have to work hard at helping advance that into the lives of the people who are part of your church, your fellowship. And so Mind the Gap is a very leader savvy book that is for ministry leaders, pastors who want to take those outcomes and that strategy to an entirely different level. And so when I think of turbocharging the engine, if you read Mind the Gap, or when you read Mind the Gap and you start to apply some of the practices that are very principally based throughout the book, you will be turbocharging your outcomes and your strategy. And so great tool, great resource. If you haven't picked it up already, I recommend you grab it.
Excellent. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on today's Clarity First webinar. After following this webinar, you'll receive an email from the Auxano team with those downloaded tools so that you can use those with your team. And if you have any questions for Jim, you can reach out to him, and he'll be happy to set up a time to talk a little bit more through about turbocharging your disciple making engine.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you joining us.
Thank you, everybody. See you next time. Bye-bye.